Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is the podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and today we are talking about two books that are by authors that I've interviewed in the past couple of months, and we talked about later books in the series that they've written, and then I had the opportunity to go back and read the first books in those series, which is always great because then you get to fill in some of those gaps. And while I might prefer to read my series in order, it's not something that I mind on, especially these series that are not quite standalone. They're connected, but you can still read them as standalone novels. So I am talking today about Siren's Song by Cynthia Diamond and His Perfect Partner by Priscilla Oliveras. So we're going to start with Siren's Song, and this is the first in Diamond's Wyrd Love Series. I spoke to her a few weeks ago about the fourth in that series, which is called Alchemy's Hunger. That tells the story of Tony, or Anthony, and you can tell there's a lot more to his backstory when you read Alchemy's Hunger. There is mention of the Constance sisters and their mother and how Tony was involved with her death. And so going back to book one, then we are introduced to those Constance sisters and we get a lot more story. It's interesting because with Tony being the main character in the fourth book in Alchemy's Hunger, it's really strange to go back and see him as the definite villain of the piece. The sisters are, understandably and justifiably angry with him because they had grown up with him. He'd been raised almost like a brother in some ways, and then he was responsible for their mother's death. So they have a lot of baggage as a family in terms of Tony. And so going backwards, it really started to fill in some of those gaps where Tony is concerned. And like I said, these can be read as standalone novels. I mean, I read the fourth one before I read any of the first three. And as I said, you could tell that there was story that you got glimpses of in terms of Tony's past, in terms of the Constance family and the three sisters in that family. But I didn't feel like I was completely lost reading that fourth book. But it is nice then to go back in and, as I said, fill in some of those gaps. So let me give you the description of Siren's Song, which, as I said, is the first in Cynthia Diamond's Wyrd Love Series. Between being hunted by vampires and her inability to control her siren's powers, all Adele Constance wants is to be left alone. She runs from her home, hoping to lay low in the small Washington town of Whitmore. She didn't count on meeting Jack, a cranky 900-year-old dragon, who, despite her protests, vows to protect her. She also didn't count on him being so deliciously attractive in that grumbling way. Jack has no desire for a mate, especially after being dumped by the love of his life. Yet somehow he's suckered into protecting a beautiful siren who can make things explode just by raising her voice. Reluctantly, he takes the alluring Adele under his wing, finding her quirky charms irresistible. And when angry vampires come to take her back, the dragon finds he's not giving her up without a fight. One way or another, things will be ending with a boom. So this is, as Alchemy's Hunger is, it is romance, it is contemporary urban fantasy, and we get the story of the first of the Constance sisters. She's the middle sister, Adele, and as it says in the description, she is a siren. her older sister, Valerie, is a Valkyrie, and her younger sister is a Dryad. And as I was first reading this book, knowing that they're all half-breeds, you could say. Half-bloods, I can't remember. Half-breeds sounds terrible. Isn't that just an awful stereotypical word? Half-bloods. We're going to go with that. They are half Dryad, half Valkyrie, half Siren. And I kept thinking, their mother started out her adult life as a nun, and I'm thinking, my goodness, how did that happen? That she went from being a nun to having 3 daughters who are half of something from the Wyrd, as it's called. She went the opposite way from being a nun, but it turns out that they are 3 adopted daughters. So that then explained that. It wasn't that mom got a little crazy with the Wyrd men and had 3 daughters by 3 different types of Wyrd men. Anyway, so this is the story of the Siren and Jack, who is a 900-year-old dragon. He's in human form most of the time. You learn a lot about the Wyrd and how you can spot the Wyrd, because this is urban fantasy. So the fantasy exists right alongside our quote-unquote normal reality. A lot of people are mundanes, and then there are the Wyrd who blend in more or less in different ways, whether that's using glamours or shapeshifters or whatever it is. So Adele moves to this Washington town to escape when she was kidnapped by vampires, which is another long story, and Siren's blood is apparently extraordinarily addictive. So she moves in with her cousin, who is very interesting, and I won't give too much away, but she ends up meeting Jack, who vows to protect her. And as romance novels tend to do, then things go from there. There's attraction, there's not wanting there to be attraction, there's tension, there's friction, there's all sorts of things. So it's a lot of fun, and I liked many of the things about this book as I liked about the 4th book, Alchemy's Hunger, mainly that I really enjoy Cynthia's writing and her sense of humor. She has her main characters, the women especially, kind of talking to themselves a lot, or, the dialogues in their head remind me of... is it dialogue when it's in your own head? The monologues in their head? Anyway, the conversations in their own heads remind me a lot of the conversations that I have in my own head, where you're like second guessing or kind of rolling your eyes at yourself or the situation around you. She's got a really quirky sense of humor. She's got a really fun way of looking at the world. And I said when I did the interview that she looks at the world and says, what if? So what if that XYZ event was really caused by vampires? What if, those vampires were to kidnap a siren? What if, what if? And then these stories are created from there. And it's really a testament to her imagination and everything. I actually listened to this book on audiobook. And when we were talking about it, when I was talking to her in the interview, she said that the audiobook had just come out and that she really loved the person that they'd gotten to narrate it, whose name I am blanking on. I will look that up for you during the break. And he does a really good job. He does the voices very well. I could always tell who was speaking even before he identified them. I think maybe my favorite part about the narration, though, is that Jack the Dragon is originally from Scotland, even though he's 900 years old, and he's been living in this country for a couple hundred years. And the narrator, does a really good Scottish accent. It's a lot of fun. So if you are the type of person that likes to listen to a nice Scottish brogue, then you might want to listen to this book on audiobook. If you don't care one way or the other, then you may want to read it. Totally up to you, but I thought it was a lot of fun. I'm glad I went back. I will hopefully find time to read the intervening 2 and then any others. There's not a 5th one out yet, but and there's not audiobooks for 2nd, 3rd, and 4th books in the series yet. Hopefully those will come out sooner rather than later, and then if I don't have time to read, hopefully I'll have time to listen, because I still want more of this story, and I'm I got to know the older and the younger sister well enough that now I want to know them a little better. I want to hear their stories because obviously they're still going to be fantasy, contemporary fantasy. They're going to be romance, and I want to see who they end up with and then how that all ties in with book 4 and where the series goes from there. So if you like contemporary urban fantasy, if you like romance, you should definitely check out the Wyrd Love Series by Cynthia Diamond. I am going to take a break. When I come back, I will be talking about another of the authors that I interviewed recently, Priscilla Oliveras, and the first book in her Match to Perfection series. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am talking today about 2 books that are the first in the series of books by or series by authors that I have interviewed in the last couple of months on the podcast. I was speaking before the break about Siren's Song by Cynthia Diamond, and I said that I would look up the name of the audiobook narrator in case you were interested in. And even though I listened to it and I heard him pronounce his name, I am not sure that I can pronounce his name correctly. So I'm going to probably butcher it. Michael Ferraiolo. It's got a lot of vowels. Ferraiuolo. I apologize profusely if that is your last name or you know someone with that last name about how badly I butchered it. But if you look up Siren Song by Cynthia Diamond, then you'll see the narrator. You don't have to look it up by the narrator, obviously. You can find it by its title and its author. So moving on to our second book, as I said, it is the first in the Match to Perfection series by Priscilla Oliveras. And if you remember, if you listened to that episode, we talked mostly about the second book in the series, which looks at the middle sister also. So there's a lot of middle sisters happening today on the podcast, excuse me. That one is called Her Perfect Affair, excuse me, I just blanked on the word, and that is about the middle sister of the Fernandez sisters, Rosa, and her relationship with Jeremy. So you maybe, if you listen to that, you might, just to kind of help you remember, in case you're trying to remember that interview or what that book was about. So let me give you the description for his perfect partner, and that starts with 3 very different Latina sisters, 3 dazzling talents with ambition and passion to burn, and in this warm-hearted, sexy new series, 3 chances to figure out if the path to success can also lead to lasting love. So that's nice because you actually get then an introduction to the series as well as the book, which is this. Ad executive Tomas Garcia shouldn't even be thinking about his daughter's alluring dance teacher, Yasmin Fernandez. Burned by a shattering divorce, he's laser focused on his career and giving his young daughter, Maria, the secure home she deserves. Plus, he's certain that with her talent, Yaz will be leaving Chicago and heading back to Broadway as soon as she can. But Yaz's generous spirit and caring concern are sparking a desire Tomas can't resist and doesn't want to let go. For Yaz, good-looking workaholics like Tomas simply can't be a part of her life ever again. She owes it to herself to get back her confidence and fulfill the dreams her papa could not. She's glad to spend time with Maria and taste the family life she feels she can never have. And she's sure that she and Tomas can keep their attraction under control because there's so much at stake. But each unexpected intimacy, each self-revelation makes the fire between them grow hotter with every step and every risk to their hearts. Again, that is His Perfect Partner by Priscilla Oliveras, and it is the first in the Match to Perfection series. As with the book we talked about in the first segment, then I went back and read. So for me, it's almost like a prequel, except that's not the order that they were written in. I knew what happened to Yasmin and Tomas because, obviously they're still characters, they're secondary characters now in the second book about Rosa and Jeremy. So I knew where their story was going to end. But let's be honest, when you read romance novels, you pretty much 90% of the time know where the story is going to end, right? You know that they are going to go through ups and downs and attraction and rejection and friction and fighting and all of those good things. And most of the time they're going to end up together at the end because it's a romance novel, right? That's the way it works. So it's not as though I had ruined the book by reading the second one first. Absolutely not. Because this way I, again, got to fill in the gaps. So I know where their story is going, but I get to find out now how they get there. And I get to see the other characters in different lights. And I get to know more about Ronaldo, the father in the family, because he is, and if you've I don't think this is a spoiler alert, but maybe just plug your ears for the next 10 seconds or move on. But Ronaldo is no longer alive in the second book. And so it was really nice to get to know him in this book as a character rather than just as the memory of him in the second book. I mean, he's a hugely important part of the books and the girls' lives, the women's lives. So it was really fun and nice to then see him in this book and get to know him better. And also then to see two secondary characters in the second book as the main characters in this book and find out more about them, as well as seeing Rosa as a secondary character and getting the opinion of the sisters from the older sister's perspective. We get it from the middle sister's perspective, obviously, in the second book, and she's definitely a middle child. She's a peacemaker. Yasmin is the oldest sister, and she feels the responsibility of the family just as much as Rosa does, but in a different way. So we get to see all the trials and tribulations, and I really like the Fernandez family. I really like the Fernandez sisters. I'm excited that there is still a third one to come, as well as a novella where we will still be with this family. So it's romance. It is, I was just going to say it's romance, which I just said. It's romance. It's a lot of fun. It's a definite family-oriented book. Yasmin has come home from New York to take care of her papa, who is sick, and she's been home for a couple of years, putting her career in New York on hold. And then she meets, as the book said, Tomas, the father of one of her dance students, and it is instant attraction, but they both have reasons that they don't think the relationship should go anywhere or that it will work. And you get then all of that lovely tension of, sexual tension, as well as tension of expectations and their own ways of navigating the world and all of that good stuff. Plus all of the family. They both come from families that are very close. Rosa, as I mentioned, came home, so she's living with her father, so we get to see that relationship. Her sisters come home from college. They're very close-knit. Tomas's family is in Texas, so we don't see them like we do Yasmin's family, but you can still tell how important they are to him in his life. And one thing that I really like about Priscilla's writing is just the way it's so natural. We talked a little bit in the interview about the blending of English and Spanish, and she writes how she talks. So, she's bilingual, and the characters in the book are bilingual, and there's a lot of Spanish phrases peppered throughout, but you never feel like you don't know what people are saying because it's all explained in ways that are natural. And I feel the same way about the way she writes about family. It's just natural. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel as though there's this big, ooh, family is important, pay attention here. It's just the way she writes. It's obvious that yes, family is important. Family is one of the central tenets of this book, and it's obvious because of the way the people care about each other, the way the characters talk about each other. It's not as though, there's a chapter entitled Family is Important and Here's Why, and so I really appreciate just the natural way that Priscilla writes. And I'm looking forward, as I said, to the third book with the third sister. It's not out yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And again, hopefully I will find time to read it. I'm very excited that I was able to find time to read this one. I'd actually hoped to read it before the interview, but, life, unfortunately, sometimes gets in the way. At any rate, if you are a fan of romance, then this is definitely a series that you should check out. Maybe in the first segment you were thinking, I am a fan of romance, but I'm not so much a fan of urban fantasy or fantasy in general. Well, then here's a different series for you to check out. Still romance, still about three sisters, lots of fun. So, we are going to take our second break of the podcast, and when we come back, I'm going to give you a few updates on some other authors that have been on the podcast. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and we could call this episode kind of an update episode since I'm talking about two of the authors that I've had on the podcast. And as I was thinking about and putting this episode together, I was realizing that, I was going to talk about these two books, and recently had Jasmine Silvera on to talk about the second book in her Grace Blood series. And if you are like me, then you follow some of your favorite authors on Amazon, and you're all very book savvy out there. I'm sure you are. So I'm sure you already follow your favorite authors on Amazon, on Goodreads, on BookBub, on whatever preferred website or, place that you go to for recommendations and reviews and all of those good things. What I like about this is that I get updates when authors that I read have new books coming out. And since I just had Jasmine back and I was talking about these two books, I thought, hey, I've been getting emails lately from lots of my favorite authors or my featured authors on the podcast. Some of those are favorite and featured. So first off, if you remember a couple weeks ago, I keep saying a couple weeks ago, I don't know, it could be a couple months ago. Time it's just going way too fast right now. So I keep saying a couple weeks. That could be 6 months for all I know. But we recently did 3 authors from the Tawny Mountain Mysteries on the podcast: Marla J. Hayes, Lori Fagan, and R.J. Rossetti. And when R.J. was on the podcast, he was saying how the Dark Side of the Mountain is his contribution to the Tawny Mountain Mysteries, and that features 2 characters, Katie and Malone. And he was talking about how He created those characters for the Tawny Mountain Mysteries, but then wanted to continue with them, and so now they have their own series, the Katie and Malone Mysteries. There are 2 books now out in that. I have not had a chance to read them. This is just an update. The first one is called Revenge Comes Calling, and the second is called Isle of Deceit. And if you listen to the episode with Randy, with RJ, he does talk about both of them, so it gives a little bit of an overview. But this continues the Katie and Malone Mysteries. There was definitely a connection between Katie and Malone. Nothing romantic necessarily in the first one, but that was where it was leaning. So obviously they're getting together to solve more mysteries. So we'll see, where that's going. I will give you the description of at least the first one, Revenge Comes Calling. Katie Douglas and Casey Malone first met at the Tawny Mountain Resort. She, an inspecting engineer, he, a relaxing mystery novelist. Together they discovered a kidnapping plot on the mountain. As they tried to unravel the mystery, they uncovered a plot to bomb the high society wedding of the Wittenauer family being held at the resort. An imprisoned mafia don vowed revenge on Robert Wittenauer, the former DA that sent him to prison for life and had set in motion the plot to murder the entire family and guests at the wedding. After thwarting both of these plots in an explosive climax to the story, Katie and Casey went their separate ways, promising to get together again. Now, Katie is on her way to spend what she hopes will be a romantic weekend at Casey's mountaintop retreat in Virginia. Before their evening begins, the long reach of the mob interrupts their solitude, promising that no good deed will go unpunished. Vowing to get even for the couple's interference at the Tawny Mountain Resort, the perpetrators of both plots take aim at Katie and Casey. As they dodge mafia hitmen with the aid of a mysterious caller, Katie and Casey fight for their lives when revenge comes calling. Like I said, I haven't read this book, but I want to. It sounds like so much fun. Another one of my authors, well, actually, I was just talking about Priscilla, and I should have mentioned this in the last segment. But Priscilla has a new book out as well. It is actually the 3rd book of a 4-book series. It is the Paradise Key series. It is, as I said, is book 3. It is called Resort to Love. Again, I haven't read this series, but it came up as something new from Priscilla, so I was excited to read about that. There are new books there's so many new books. Book 8 in the Micah Reed series just came out. If you remember, that is a series by Jim Heskett. Talked to him, again, a couple of weeks ago. Talked to him about his Micah Reed series. We talked about the first one, but if you are interested in that, this is the 8th book in that series, so that's exciting. I have only read the first one, so I don't think I want to read Paper Tiger. It's called Paper Tiger. Did I say that? It's called Paper Tiger. I don't want to read that one yet because I want to read the other intervening 6. And then there's also his Lane Parrish series. Lane Parrish is kind of a spin-off. He's a character from the Micah Reed series. And there's at least, it's a 2-book series. I'm not sure if that means there's only going to be 2 books, but there are at least a couple of books there. So that is another of the authors that's been on here recently. Maddie Dalrymple has a new book coming out in her Lizzie Ballard series. Now, this time I do know this wasn't a couple of weeks ago. I talked to Maddie last year. So this was, you could still say a couple of weeks if you really wanted to. But if you remember, we talked to her about not her Lizzie Ballard series, but we talked about The Sense of Death, which is an Anne Kinnear mystery series. And so we talked about that series, but we talked a little bit also about the first in her Lizzie Ballard series, which is called Rock, Paper, Scissors. And the new one, Snakes and Ladders, comes out June 21st. So if you're a fan of Maddie's or you've read the Anne Kinnear novels and want to read the Lizzie Ballard novels, you can read Rock, Paper, Scissors out now, and then Snakes and Ladders comes out on June 21st. So lots of good. I'm noticing that there's kind of a theme in this section of thrillers and mysteries. We had romance in the first 2 segments, and now in this segment for updates, we are heavy on the thrillers and mysteries, but that's okay. I like thrillers and mysteries. I feel like there's more and more books from authors that I've had on the podcast, and I apologize that I am not remembering them. But if you don't already follow authors on Amazon or Goodreads or BookBub or whatever, then I encourage you to do so, because it's a wonderful way of keeping track of when they have new books come out. You will get an email saying, new from XYZ author, and then you can add that to your to be read list, which I'm sure is just as long as mine is. But I sometimes find myself thinking, okay, now what are the authors that I really love? Like when I'm wandering the library stacks, and for some reason my mind just goes completely blank. Can't think of anything. I don't know why. I've actually gotten a lot better at keeping track of what books I like, what series I'm in the middle of, etc. I've got a lot of different ways of doing that. Sometimes I take pictures on my phone of books that I want to read. I have lists of books that I want to read. I also keep track of the books that I have read, and you can actually do a lot of that on places like Goodreads. But then when I follow authors, then I get the emails saying, hey, they have a new book coming out, which I can say, yay, I've been wondering when that was coming out. At any rate, like I said, you, I'm sure, are all savvy readers and already do this, but if for some reason you didn't realize this was something you could do, then I highly recommend it. Just follow the authors, and then you'll get updates, and as always, you can always change your preferences for what kind of emails you want to receive. I'm not advocating that you get emails that you don't want, but if you want to follow authors and find out when they have new books coming out, then that's a great way to do it. I think I have blathered on long enough, and that you probably have a book that you want to be reading. So I'm going to wrap this episode up. I hope you will join me again on Tuesday. I'm going to revisit another series that I read as a child, and that is a series, series. I mean, they're all connected. Anyway, series by Joan Aiken. If you've never read Joan Aiken, she is a lot of fun, but I'm not going to talk about that now. You have to tune in on Tuesday and hear what we have to say. The royal we. Hear what I have to say about Joan Aiken. The first book is The Wolves of Willoughby Chase. So join me on Tuesday for that. In the meantime, go out there and get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.